Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we talk all the time about the Beatles, anything we like to talk about, the group years, the solo years, the songs, the albums, their history, the news, whatever we feel like here on this channel. And this time out, we've got an extra special panel to bring to you, and we're going to have some fun talking about what we feel are Paul McCartney's most underrated top three underrated studio albums of his post-Beatles career. Now, I know some people like to differentiate between solo and Wings. We're considering all of that. If you want to include a Wings album, that's fine. If you want to include a Fireman album, that's fine. All that's up for grabs. The only thing that we're not considering would be, of course, since we're saying studio, no live albums, no compilations, none of Paul's classical works. We'll save that for another show, probably with one of our guests that I'm going to be introducing in just a moment here. But I think this is going to be a lot of fun, and we're all going to share our own opinions as to why we feel the way we do. And let's bring on our guests right now. First of all, two of the three are actually co-hosts of mine on my two podcast shows. First of all, we have Allan Kozinn, who you know from being my co-host along with Darren DeVivo on Things We Said Today, for many years writing in the classical department at the New York Times. He's the author of a few Beatle books, Got That Something, How the Beatles on Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything, and the Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop. And it just so happens that I have in my possession right here, and it's actually right behind Allan, the brand new book, The McCartney Legacy Volume 1, which covers the years 1969, takes you through the Beatle breakup, all that Paul was going through the end of 1973, when Paul and Wings released Ben on the Run. And that is coming out, this book is coming out officially December the 13th. And Allan, welcome to Ken Michaels Radio.
Great to be here.
We did a great show a while back on what we feel was the Beatles' creative peak, which got a great reaction. And so it's good to have you back. We also have Joe Mayo, who you know from being one of my co-hosts on Talk More Talk, a Solo-Beatles Videocast, along with Kid O'Toole and Tom Hunyadi. And he has his own video channel, Mean Mr. Mayo, where he does so many different things. Fab Gab, where he rates Beatle and solo Beatle albums track by track of what the best songs are. He goes through this record hunt at a local store and tells you all the latest things that he's been buying. And he does rants on his channel, which are a lot of fun. And it's proved to be a very popular channel. Joe, good to have you back on my channel.
Thanks very much, Ken. Great to be here. Thank you.
And we also have with us some new fresh blood right here on this channel, and that's Ed Rising. Ed had me on his podcast show, Ed's Pop-O-Matic Podcast. It's hard to say that. You got to make
it's
it
a long
easier.
one.
Pop-O-Matic Podcast. And tell the folks what your podcast is all about.
No, it's a retro podcast, and so we talk about everything, but it has to be old.
Okay. So Ed was nice enough to have me on his podcast show. We discussed my love for radio and how I got started in radio, my favorite radio stations. And of course, every Beatle fan loves the Partridge Family. So we had a very nice conversation about their music and why I like their music. So welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Ken. Welcome to everybody.
One thing you got to know about Talk More Talk, especially, is that everyone's ready with the latest, product to show right here on screen. And so right there, what was that? Was that the DVD?
Oh yeah, that's a DVD. I didn't mean to take Ed's moment. I just I thought I was inspired to show it.
All right. So the topic, like I said, we're all going to talk about what we feel are Paul's most underrated, top three underrated studio albums in his solo career. So I thought we'd start with Joe, because every time we do something like this on Talk More Talk, he's never the first one, and everybody ends up picking some of the same choices that he would pick. So
Yeah.
out of respect for Joe, I figured we'd let him tell his
Well,
top three first.
sometimes it's actually a benefit not to go first. This one, I don't know why I'm feeling like this may be one of those times. But
Hmm.
anyway, I'll tell you, I had a hard time narrowing down to three because I had four and possibly five. Okay.
Hmm.
But all right, here we go. I think I'll start with this one, which I'm putting, if I call it my least kind of, overrated. I'm going with Back to the Egg, which I love. I've loved this album from the beginning
Uh-huh.
when I first heard it, when it first came out. I was a teenager, and I think the reason I'm putting this as the one I'm mentioning first as maybe the least underappreciated to me is because it's one of those albums that seems to be getting a little bit of reappraisal, at least in the circles I'm in. A
Hmm.
lot of times on my channel, we discuss certain albums, and a lot of people say, "Well, I really like Back to the Egg," and of course, everybody's saying how they cannot wait for the archives edition
Hmm.
that we're hopefully going to be getting, along maybe with London Town, or one or both. You
Right.
know, but what I like about Back to the Egg, and what I've always liked about it, is it was kind of a harder edge for Paul. Some people go as far to say punk. Uh,
Mm.
maybe I don't know if I'd agree with that 100%, except maybe Spin It On,
Right.
a little punky, and Old Siam Sir, which I've always adored that song, and from day one, it's my favorite track on there. But yeah, it still in some corners doesn't get really a lot of praise, and I just think it's something that's up and due for a reevaluation. And
Right.
hopefully, when the day comes and we do get one with some bonus cuts and extras, workings of the songs, and seeing how maybe it goes evolution wise, each track, maybe there'll
Right.
be more appreciation for it. I just think a lot of people are saying, and that was always a complaint, classic complaint that people were
Mm.
saying about Paul. Oh, he's too soft, and he silly love songs and all this kind of thing.
Hmm.
And if you're a person that does think that, well, then try out Back to the Egg. I think it really is good. And the other thing, there's always the talk about how Good Night Tonight wasn't on here. I believe, was it the record company that wanted to put it on, but Paul didn't want it on?
No, Paul, well, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Paul didn't want it on. Paul wanted it to be a single by
right.
itself. Yeah.
Now, I think the sales would have been a lot better. We all could pretty much guess.
Right.
But there's also artistic integrity, right? If Paul just feels it doesn't belong on there, shouldn't be on there. I wish it was because I think it would have sold better. But then I've
Hmm.
always thought, as much as I love the song "Baby's Request," which is the closing track, it could be argued that doesn't really fit on there, as well as some of those other songs like "To You" and the Rockestra theme, which I should mention. Rockestra theme, I'm a big fan of. So glad to see you here as well when we had all the
Right.
other musicians come on. And I'm hoping the Rockestra film is going to be included in the McCartney archive. I mean, I really want a nice copy of that.
Right.
But yeah, I think I've pretty much said it all. But so Good Night Tonight could be on there, Paul, you know, if you got Baby's Request.
Yeah, I would
All right,
say, To You is definitely very
To You.
punkish.
Yeah.
I would say that. Yeah. Did you like the choice of Chris Thomas as co-producer?
Oh yeah. It's very, very, very well done. I mean, I just the sound is just so much different than what I was used to hearing from Paul. I thought at that time, and following London Town especially,
Hmm.
and the songs that were recorded in the castle and all that, and it's got some pretty darn good video tracks to see too.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go to the next
Okay.
one.
If
This
any of
is
you
tough.
want
Grab.
to add
Oh
any
yeah. Anybody wants to have any
opinions
comments? Don't
to
let
what
me
Joe's
stop you.
saying here, and
Some
if
of them
you
may have the
agree with
same
him
albums.
or disagree with him.
Well, I could say that I would agree with Joe. We had some very similar thoughts in regards to that album.
Hmm. Yep. Alan?
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's one of my three. So
That's what that's one of the things when you go later that's not so good in this case,
oh, I
right?
know.
But
So I cut mine
but
short.
yeah, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone in that. All right, well, I'll save it for you later, Alan. Then how about that? So,
It's also,
well,
it's a powerful statement if all of us vote for the same album. So depends on how you
yeah,
look at it. It's nice if it's all different choices, but then if we all say the same thing, or at least one album or two albums, that's saying a lot, I think.
I think I may have at least one that's not going to be in here, and I think I'll do that one next,
Okay.
just because I'm guessing this is going to be unique to mine, but I could be wrong. It's 2013 album New,
Hmm.
which to tell you how much I love this album, I would be here all night. Okay, again, at first the title New came out, right, and it was like, what does this mean? His new album? How you gonna? What kind of title is that? And then I realized it's more the spirit of the album, the feel of everything. It's bright, it's fresh, it's
Hmm.
spontaneous and fun and new and energetic. I love the vibe to the album. And I think that's the idea of new, you know, fresh and with Nancy. Oh, so many good tracks, and they're so different, and there's so many different producers on the album that gives it a different flavor all around. I like that. Some people didn't care for that. Um, and the reason I'm putting it as underrated, I think what I noticed happened was when Egypt Station came out.
Hmm.
Next time we do an overrated show, I'll pick Egypt Station.
Yeah,
I like it, but I think it's a little overrated. It's okay. But this got buried. To me, it's like everybody forgot about New. It's like, what the heck happened to New? It's now old. I guess it's like nobody's thinking about it. And I just loved it. I mean, I don't, everybody knows my channel and has heard me blabber on. I don't like modern music. Quote, I use the term loosely. I'm talking about the kind of music you hear in the so-called top 40 in the malls and stuff like that, the electronic stuff. So I didn't appreciate the song "Appreciate" at
Hmm.
first, but I did like that he was trying to tap into a little of the new stuff. And now I like that one. Quite a bit, but it's not my favorite track. I mean, I'm going to go track by track. I don't know. Save Us, what a great rocking opener. Just get right to business, right down to smashing in there.
Uh-huh.
Uh, grabs your attention right away. He did well. I was going to say he didn't usually do that, but no, it's not always true. Sometimes with Getting Closer or something, I guess you
Yeah.
could say that happened. Alligator is such a fun, delightful track. Alligator was a song I was privileged to hear. I got to see Paul at a sound check in 2017,
Hmm.
and he did Alligator as part of the sound check.
Nice.
And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to hear him do, more, the old thing we say, right? As much as we love all the Beatles tracks and the popular McCartney songs, so nice to go a little bit deeper.
Hmm.
Excuse me. I mean, Queenie Eye, early days. One thing I'll say about early days, I love that he used his more weary kind of older voice
Hmm.
because I think that song early days has to have a person like a lot of people say I like early days, but I don't like the way Paul sings it. I wish he could sing it better. And I said, well, that fits the song. I think he's looking back. Hey, those old days we had. I lived through those early days, and I don't want to see Paul from the Ed Sullivan Show era singing early days, or
Hmm.
something like that. I can bet. I can bet is such an overlooked
Yeah.
song. I love the whole kind of play between Paul and his partner. As
Hmm.
if I may not be stuck. Don't worry about me. Wait for me to be steady. I'll be there when
Hmm.
you're ready. He's getting older. That's how I always take it. It's like they're still gonna have fun, and he could still surprise her, with some tricks, and she'll never know
Hmm.
what's gonna come next. And on and on and on. I even love Hosanna. I think that's kind of like mystical and otherworldly for Paul. Yeah,
Okay.
I think what I like about it so much is just that there's so much difference on here, and the single, the title track, "New," was another hit that should have been, that would have been, had it been
In the
couple of decades
70s.
ago. 70s. Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
go back. It's a couple of decades. No,
Yeah.
more than a couple of decades. 70s.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just think it gets overlooked because of the praise that we saw for Egypt Station. All right.
Paul still
Yes, go ahead.
does new in concert,
Yes,
and I think he was doing Queenie Eye. So it's not like he was forgetting about that album.
that's
you know?
true in this case.
Uh,
And even though he says, "Hey, look, the phones are going to go dead," I know. Well, you're going to do new
he
songs
shouldn't
anyway.
say
We don't
that.
care. I know, right? He says, "We're going to do them anyway. We don't care." I think
Yeah.
that's funny. When he does that bit, you know. All right. One more. This is tough, narrowing it down to one. There's a couple of obvious ones I'm leaving out, I think. Uh, I left out Wildlife and I left out McCartney too. See how I get those in there? I went
Sneak
with
'em
Off the
in.
Ground, another album that I like quite a bit.
Hmm.
Now granted, this would be a much better album if we could play around with the bonus tracks and put
Absolutely.
some of those tracks in here.
Hmm.
Maybe take a couple out. That's all subjective, which ones you want to take out. I won't say any, but I just like this from the beginning too. I love Off the Ground, even though I kind of blush a little bit when I listen to that song Off the Ground and
Hmm.
he's doing la 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 and all that. I gotta say it's a good pop song. It's got all the Paulyisms that I love from all Pauly, and I I think I Owe It All to You is beautiful.
Sure is.
Hope of Deliverance, again, a single that I think should have been a hit. And when I was lucky enough to get up close, I won tickets to the Up Close show, MTV Up Close,
Hmm.
and the album hadn't been out yet, and he was doing songs from this album for the first time.
Right.
I remember, so because I was close. I mean, I was lucky to win tickets. I was standing pretty close to the stage, and I said, "Number one, Paul," I said, and I could swear he kind of was like, kind of like as if to say at that, maybe I hope so, kind of thing. I was wrong. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
number one. So, but I think Hope of Deliverance was a great choice for single,
I agree.
uh,
Yeah.
and
Excuse me.
should have done better. I don't despise Biker like an icon, like most people do, just because the
Hold on a
title
second,
is a
let me get my
mouthful.
bottle. Okay, hold on.
Well, I'm sorry, it's a mouthful, the title,
Yeah.
but I like his voice, the way it kind of rises and as he goes on with the song, he's getting more intense
Hmm.
as he's singing the Biker like an icon line. And I picked up on that, I think, on Saturday Night Live when he did it. I like the way he did that live. So that's what gave me an appreciation for that song. Now, some of the songs that people love, I'm not wild about. I'm not wild about The Lovers That Never Were. Elvis Costello, that's the favorite. A lot of people. I'm not big on the Elvis Costello McCartney team up. That's a whole other show. And I don't want to. I don't want to diss Flowers in the Dirge. And I mean, Flowers in the Dirt. No. I like a lot of songs off Flowers in the Dirt, just not
Okay.
consistently. Just have a little fun with you. And Come On People, I think a Hey Jude for the '90s, and I love that.
Okay.
I just think it's overlooked, underrated. I think hopefully we'll get a expanded version of this one
Hmm.
day, and when we do, you can listen to those tracks like Long Leather Coat
Oh yeah.
and Kicked Around No More. That's the other one, Big Boys Bickering,
Uh-huh.
which I gotta say I was pretty amazed when he did that live. Because who expected him to throw the F bomb all over the place?
Right.
It was almost like trying too hard for him to do it so obviously so often. But he did announce that as coming another one off the new album, and it never did come on the new album.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, last minute decision, not a good idea, to put that out.
So great choices there. And every time that I think about Off the Ground, I think about what you just said, which is, there's so many great bonus tracks on those EPs that came out,
Yeah.
the CD singles. And yeah, Keep Coming Back to Love is a great song to me. Style. I think a lot of those you could put on the album and take out a few. But I do Me personally, I love the collaboration with Elvis Costello.
Yeah, I know.
Mistress and Maid and The Lovers That Never Were is an amazing song to me. But yeah, and I'm glad to hear you defend Biker Like an Icon.
Yeah, and I should defend also Cosmically Conscious, which I love. I mean, it's repetitive, but I love it. That's one of those songs, just like Fly Robin Fly or Funky Town or something like that. I could listen to him sing that Cosmically Conscious bit for an hour and never
Uh-huh.
grow tired of it. And I wish it wasn't so short on the album. And before I stop, let me just mention something I almost forgot. Now I could be wrong, but I think this is the last time that Linda was really featured. I know she's on Flaming Pie, but this seems to me like more like the first phase, first second, that phase of McCartney
Mhm.
was almost like the end of that era. I thought,
Right.
in my opinion, right before
Plus,
we got to
yeah.
Flaming Pie.
Plus you had the tour, the New World Tour, to go along with it, and Linda was part of that. So yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely right. All right, who shall I pick next? How about let's go with Allan.
Okay. Excuse me. The first one will surprise you, probably, Ken.
Wildlife. Okay.
Wildlife.
Why would that surprise me?
Because I've always trashed it whenever we've talked about it.
Okay.
Oh,
You know,
Um,
your opinions have changed over time since you
have,
started
yes.
doing the show. So yeah.
Yes, and also in this case, since working on the book, when we
Right.
got quite deeply into the recording sessions for Wildlife, and I've come to understand it more and like a lot of it more. I guess it should have been apparent to me, but never was, that it really is almost two albums packaged together, yoked together, one might say.
Hmm.
The first side is supposed to be kind of, rough and semi-impromptu. It's actually not that impromptu, but that's the feeling that they were going for. And the second side with, Some People Never Know I'm Your Singer, Tomorrow, Dear Friends, those are softer, more thoroughly written out and arranged songs. And
Hmm.
that is, for me, the better stuff. Excuse me. But for instance, we found a lot of interesting stuff, like the idea of, mumbo. Mumbo is really sort of a big illusion in a way. I mean, starting off with, Take It, Tony. I mean, there's a red light that goes on. So he would know whether Tony was already taking it or not, but he
Uh-huh.
has to have known that it would sound cool and in the middle of everything and impromptu to say that, and he did. And it's pitched as a jam, and it has that kind of live-ish feeling, like a live in the studio jam. But if you listen to it and you listen to the instruments on it, or the instrumentation, and you know that there are only 4 people in wings, you kind of begin to realize that, wait a minute, this can't really be live.
Hmm.
And they did a lot of work on it. They came back to it 2 or 3 times after the initial session, and fixed it up, and then took bits of the stuff that they cut out of the longest version of it and used them for the mumbo link, which was kind of interesting.
Hmm.
And then Love Is Strange. Love Is Strange started out as a jam that they did up in Rude Studio up in Scotland, and was kind of a reggae jam. Linda was really into reggae. Well, they both were, and they remained into reggae, but this was sort of towards the beginning of their romance with reggae. And so they were doing this reggae thing, and it was supposed to be an instrumental, and an original instrumental. And when they played it back after the first take, Paul said, wait a minute, the words to Love Is Strange fit to that. It really is Love Is Strange. So they added vocals and it became Love Is Strange. It almost didn't have to be a cover,
Yeah.
but it became a cover. I think they would have gotten away with it if they hadn't put the lyrics on and just made it a reggae instrumental
Hmm.
or other lyrics or something.
It's,
Um,
it's fascinating stuff that's in your book.
yeah. Oh, and I should mention, by the way, we didn't mention Adrian Sinclair, my co-author.
Yes.
We're talking about the book. I should mention him. And let's see what else. Wildlife itself, that whole story of him driving through the African game reservation and seeing the sign that says the animals have the right of way.
Mhm.
It's kind of interesting, what appeals to Paul that might come out in a song someday.
Mm.
He's kind of like a big vacuum cleaner with a song processor in the middle that like everything goes in and it can come out as a song somehow or other. There's a ton of instances of that, and this is one, Wildlife. Not to mention that they're sort of at the beginning of their vegetarian period, and they're sort of attracted by the idea of animals having rights, and just sort of focusing on them. This was sort of the start of that. They didn't really become fully vegetarian for quite a while. I mean, I'm in the middle of book 2, and Paul, well, not the middle, sort of towards the beginning still, but Paul is still saying, yeah, I kind of like having my bacon.
Hmm.
And there's an
Uh-huh.
interview with Linda too, saying, well, I went fully vegetarian a couple of years ago, but my husband still likes his bacon.
Uh,
So anyway, that's the first one, Wildlife. And then for the rest of them, we're going to get into familiar territory because my second one is Back to the Egg.
can I ask you one question about Wildlife before you do that?
Sure. Yeah.
When I was reading your book, and I don't want to give away too much here, but Wildlife reminds me of the Get Back Let It Be sessions. What Get Back Let It Be was supposed to be.
Right.
The Beatles as is, without overdubbing and everything. And Wildlife, there was a lot of that, and I was stunned. I remember hearing, especially from someone like Denny Sywell, that certain songs like Mumbo was one take.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
maybe the backing tracks were one take, but then there's all this overdubbing that they applied to it. So was it a disappointment to learn that in any way?
No, not really. Because I wasn't at all invested in it being like the Let It Be sessions.
Uh-huh.
I also I knew as well. I mean, they only rehearsed for like a day or two, really a day, because the first day Denny Lane mostly slept because he had been traveling, for hours and hours to get there.
Hmm.
And then they did a day of rehearsal, maybe 2, and then flew down to London to record a record. Who does that?
Hmm.
So I would expect a lot of overdubbing. They didn't know most of these songs. They knew the Love Is Strange original jam version. They knew Bip Bop. Yeah, not too much. And so the rest Paul brought in and they worked on in the studio. And excuse me, he had the Dolmetsch consort, which is, as a classical guy, like I know that. I don't know them personally, but they were, big pioneers in early music, and they played recorders. And he brought them in and had them overdub onto was it
I
some
Am Your Singer.
I'm Your Singer, right?
Yeah.
And he had them in for too, by the way. But anyway, so
Sorry.
anything else about Wildlife? Should we move on?
No,
Well,
that's it. I
I
just
I
Go
just
ahead,
want to say
Joe.
one thing. I hope that the vocals on Mumbo at least are still one take, alive and spontaneous, and not like written up, planned out. Because sometimes when you hear these things that are facts that you learn, it does break your heart a little bit. It's like, oh, I always loved Mumbo. I thought, oh, it's that one spontaneous take.
Right. But you hear there's an organ, there's all kinds of stuff going on that the 4 of them handled all at once.
Right.
But they were saying that sort of live in the studio thing immediately. I mean, it wasn't like it's 2 years later and they kind of forgot. They were immediately saying that stuff. So they knew. Anyway, you build your own myth. Building your myth is part of being a rock and roll star, and it doesn't have to be true. We want it to be true as, reporters and writers and all of that stuff. And we need to get to what the actual story is, but the myth is the myth. And people are free to make their myth whatever they want it to be.
Yeah,
So,
I can dig it.
One day. Really. It's only 700.
Let's spread that.
So, should we go on to Back to the Egg?
Sure.
Back to the Egg, I thought of as underrated because I'm always hearing people trash it, for one thing. And also partly because, we've tried, Adrian and I separately have tried several times to get Chris Thomas to talk about it, and he won't. He apparently does not have great memories of those sessions. And now that he's retired, it's something that he doesn't have to do, so he's not going to do it. And it's a pity for us, I'd really like to hear what he has to say. And yet, like Mr. Mayo, I liked it from the start, from the first time I heard it, and I also like the video version, and I really do hope that comes with it. I mean, in addition to the Rockestra film, I hope the video album of Back to the Egg comes along, and maybe
Campuchia.
What?
Campuchia concert.
And the Campuchia, there is a lot to put in that set.
Yeah.
I hope maybe there are also some promos that they decided not to use for some of the songs that aren't in the video album that they can add in. Although if they decided not to use them then, I'm not sure he's going to decide to use them now. But you never know. Maybe they were taken out for length or whatever. But it has great stuff. Getting Closer. Great track. He wrote that at around the same time he wrote Picasso's Last Words on the demo tape recorded at Dustin Hoffman's house. He goes into Getting Closer after a bit of Picasso. Spin It On. I love Spin It On. I think that was an attempt to get a bit of the punk ethos. Again and again and again. Really, to me, it's a beautiful song. It's when you think about Paul and his best work, you think in terms of melody, and that's all there. Old Siamser I could actually do without, but I understand it's got a good feel. Sometimes Paul, what is Old Siamser? What is that about? And I've heard him talk about what it's about, and I still don't know what it's about. But it kind of doesn't matter, he's going for feel there. And if you can forget about the lyrics and just go for the feel, it's a cool track. Love Arrow Through Me, Rockestra Theme, To You, Winter Rose, and Love Awake. I mean, now we're almost edging into my other life as a classical guy. Those are both beautiful songs. And
excuse me, then the video is gorgeous for that.
It is.
Yeah.
And I also like the one for Again and Again and Again in the field of, I don't know what those are. Maybe they're poppies. No, they're yellow, aren't they?
They're yellow, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but and Baby's Request. Here's the guitar intro to that is just great. And that reminds me, something I forgot to mention, which is that, this is the only album from this version of Wings. And to me, in some ways, it's the best version of Wings. I mean, just in the sense of Lawrence Juber is a trained guitarist, comfortable in classical and jazz, and brought this sort of extra dimension to Paul's work at this time. And I like Steve Holly's drumming too.
Mhm.
And so otherwise, apart from those two, you've got the basic core that's all through Wings from the start. But those were two great players. I kind of wish that he had continued with them, and also listen to them live on the concert for Kampuchea. They were a really good band. I'm sorry that didn't last.
True, I agree.
Yeah. There's also
Me too.
the much bootlegged, what is it called? Last Flight.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's got to be included.
There are
as part of the.
a number of soundboards from that tour that are really quite good, and I hope he does something like either give us one complete show or do something like he did with Wings Over Europe, on that set with
But
Wild.
he had Jeff Emmerich work on that concert,
Mhm.
so he was taking it seriously
Oh yeah,
as a possible release. So
yeah.
I just thought of something while I forgot to mention it back to the egg, but when Alan was mentioning again and again and again, I'm remembering how when I read Rolling Stone, and you know how they were trashing Paul, they were saying the only song worth mentioning on the album is again and again and again by Denny Lane, or
hmm.
words to that effect. And when I met Denny Lane once, I don't know, I just wanted to boost him up a little bit. I said, did he remember that? Did he know about that? And he didn't
Hmm.
know. He said, "Oh, really?" He was
Hmm.
amused. I didn't realize that. I said, "Yeah." So I told him that a little bit because I like that song. It's that's probably my favorite, or one of my favorites of Denny Lane's.
Hmm.
With the Wings.
Yeah.
Okay.
He had adopted, he'd absorbed Paul's sort of approach the most on that song.
Mm.
The melody, you could if he was a Paul apprentice, you would think that okay, now he's there.
Yeah.
Nice.
I Would Only Smile is a very melodic song.
Yeah.
From his early days of Wings. So, could have been influenced by Paul with that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think if you listen to Denny Lane's solo album, I think it's called Reborn, or maybe it's a greatest hits compilation. There's a lot of material there, and which shows him off as a very good songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, Time to Hide was one of the highlights of the,
Yeah,
the
that's very
Wings
good.
Over the World tour. So, yeah. Okay. So your number one pick, Alan.
Well, I did these sort of chronologically, so there's no
Okay.
evaluation.
What do you know?
The
And I still
complete
don't have
ticket.
that. I
This
don't
is
have that.
this is the Japanese edition that has a second disc with all those B-sides and things, and for
Ah,
me that has to be included.
I like the way you think.
Yeah, because when I was listening to it, first I was just going to listen to the standard album, and then I thought, well, let's hear those B-sides and things, and yeah, a lot of those B-sides were better than some of the things on here. I like the album as it is, but this is the one that I mentioned that I had reviewed that I now hear people trash. Funny thing happened with this though.
What album is that?
This is
Off the Ground.
Off the Ground.
Oh, okay.
But it's a different cover.
Different
because,
cover, right? Mhm.
he's holding the cover.
Mhm.
When this was about to come out, I was talking to Mark Lewison on the phone because I was going to be going to hear a sort of press playing with like a handful of reviewers. They were going to play it in advance because they weren't giving us copies yet. And Mark said, this is his best work since the White Album. So we're sitting in the
Wow.
yeah, I wouldn't say that really, but anyway, I hadn't heard it yet, so I'm just going in there with this as this is what I know about it. It's, according to Mark, his best thing since the White Album. So we're sitting there, and these sort of awkward moments when everyone's just sort of sitting around and you got nothing really, nothing's going on, and so his publicist is there and the other writers, and I said, yeah, was talking to a friend in England who's heard it, and he said it was Paul's best work since the White Album. What do I hear next? I hear Jeff Baker on, I think there was an international press thing. Jeff Baker gets on and he says, the New York Times Allan Kozinn says it's his best work since the White Album.
Oh,
No. By now I've heard it. And I like it a lot. I really like it a lot, but I'm not going to say it's the best work. White Album. Mark was working for him at the time. So yeah. But it is really good, and one of the good things I like about it is that there are times throughout Paul's career when he decides that it's time to take a stand on something, and he feels, I think he felt very needled by John. I mean, he said at the time when John was all out there campaigning for peace and campaigning for this and that I don't really like doing that. I don't like singing protest songs. To me, that's not really that interesting. And I think John's a little crazy for doing it, just like that. But then Bloody Sunday happened in Ireland, and he sort of realized, wait a minute, this makes me angry, and I'm going to write a song because that's what I do. And he did that. This is another one of those, looking for changes is, let's see,
Looking for changes and Long Leather Coat are really,
the B-side.
Same idea. Yeah.
B-sides have, a ton of it. Peace in the Neighborhood, Come On People. I mean, he's now, trying on this album to come up with a message. It's not necessarily a message of, this is my issue. We want to end the Vietnam War. He's actually writing things that could be sort of, globally a message. I mean, Come On People, you could sing that anytime, anywhere. Peace in the Neighborhood, same thing. Obviously he's thinking about, society as such, which he's not thinking about on, say, Mary Had a Little Lamb or Bip Bop. But here he is, and then Long Leather Coat. Let's see what else. Big Boys Bickering. All of these things on the second disc. I mean, the second disc of this one, if you want to, you should find the Japanese edition of. It's called The Complete Works. Off the Ground, The Complete Works. Disc 2, Long Leather Coat, Keep Coming Back to Love, Sweet Sweet Memories, Things We Said Today Live, Midnight Special. Style, I Can't Imagine, Cosmically Conscious, the long version of it.
It's a great song.
Yeah. Kicked Around No More, Big Boys Bickering, Down to the River, Soggy Noodle. So the two together are just a killer album. And, I think it's time for him to do an archival version with these two discs as discs 1 and 2, and then another 3 discs of ads.
Right.
And I overlooked looking for changes when I was going through mine, and I've always liked that Paul did that, got a little bit more courageous. I mean, for me personally, I like animals. I've got nothing against animals. I'm not as gung-ho animal rights as Paul, but to hear him go in there and say, I'd like to see that man take out that machine and stick it in his own brain,
Right.
Lyrics like that, like he was so angry about animals, how they've been mistreated. I love that he was courageous enough to do that song and put it on the album.
And he's taken a step further here. I mean, by now it's 1993. Everyone knows they're vegetarian, and they are now fully vegetarian. Okay, that's fine. Now we're going to go a little further on the animal thing. It's now not just we don't eat them. We don't want experimentation on them. We don't want them mistreated in any way. So he's taken a step further there, and it's a good message. You could argue about animals' use in drug testing, and the fact that it may keep us alive. But I think his argument is, well, who are we? These are beings.
Right.
So.
And he showed a video live while they toured. with looking for changes, showing all the animal testing and how cruel it was.
Right.
So
Too many
it's-
people preaching practices. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, because, you know, I mean, yeah, there's animal testing for drug testing, but there's also animal testing for, you know, things like making perfume and things that are not absolutely necessary to the world.
Mhm.
Nice, maybe, but still, if you know, if you knew what was happening for you to get that product, you might be willing to not have the product, you know. So that's why I think he's showing the film and writing these songs. And you know, it was nice to see him come out with some issues. So that was my third one.
Interesting that you and Joe both had Back to the Egg and Off
Two
the
out of
Ground.
three. Yeah.
Will it be
I
the
was waiting
same
for him
for
to
Ed?
pull out Wildlife.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't have, but yeah, I would have done Wildlife, you know, if I had another choice,
Mhm.
and McCartney too, if I had another choice.
Okay. All right, Ed.
So, well, you know, I had Off the Ground in my top 5. And so it almost made it.
Okay.
And I just want to quickly mention regarding New. Joe, that's a great choice to bring up. And the only reason why I didn't put it in is because I thought that I don't know how well it did off the charts. I don't think it was a huge chart seller, but I know that it seemed to get a lot of good critical reviews. So that's why
Mhm.
I didn't put that down. And I know how much McCartney seemed to enjoy touring with those songs. You know, like Ken said, he still plays Queenie Eye. He still
Mhm.
plays New sometimes.
And he promoted the hell out of New as well
Oh.
He did.
before it came out,
He did.
playing songs everywhere.
And when
Between-
I first heard the track New, I
Hmm.
heard the first 20 seconds or so of the song, and I completely flipped out of my mind because it's one of those infectious tracks that just as soon as I heard it, I said, "Oh my God, this is a hit record. This is a great record. How does he come up with this?" It's been writing songs for 30, 40 some odd years at this point, or 50 years at this point. And here he comes up with this whole other song. And it sounds like it should have been out there all these years, and it was so amazing to hear. And so I fell in love with it the first time I heard it, you know.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
that's one of the great things about Paul is that he'll write something new that sounds like something he hasn't done before. And then he could do a song like, I always like to bring up The World Tonight, which sounds like a Wing song.
Yes.
It could have been released in the 70s.
And I
Right.
love that as well. I thought that
Yeah.
should have been a hit single.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. And the song New is very Beatles to me. It's got a Penny Lane feel to it when I think about that
Mhm.
song. So yeah, I think Beatles when I think New.
Yeah, definitely.
And the
All
one
right.
thing I would like to say about the album New is that it's consistently strong all the way through. And it's kind of like with Flowers in the Dirt, you know, New had 4 producers on there. And you wouldn't be able to tell a Giles Martin production from, you know, a Mark Ronson production or an Ethan Johns production.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I love about that album. It's a lot of different styles on there, but that's what McCartney's all about. But
Yeah.
anyway, your top 3.
All right. So I'm going to start with Driving Rain from 2001. I think that this song, this album itself got a lot of criticism. And it didn't do as well as it could have, possibly because it was released in the aftermath of 9/11. And I don't know, maybe people were interested in buying an album immediately afterwards. I mean, sure, after a few months afterwards, people's lives came back together again, and they were buying music, playing music. Then maybe the album might have done better if it had been released a little bit later on. But I happen to think that this is one of Paul's better efforts, and coming out of the situation that he was in, having lost Linda and having to make original new music, because the previous rock and roll album, Run Devil Run, was also very well done. But this was his first record of new material. And I really like a lot of the experimentation he uses on the record. Lonely Road is the top track because it's just a good rocker. His voice is in top shape. From a Lover to a Friend had some lyrical confusion about exactly what this is about. And the way I excuse, I guess I'm a Paul excuser at times because I just love him. I love his music. I love his voice. I love his styling. And when he wrote From Lover to a Friend, I was given the impression that it was supposed to be sort of about his transition from mourning Linda to moving on to Let Me Love Again.
Right.
But I think you kind of create your own idea of what the song is. I think Allan mentioned it earlier on one of the other tracks that he was talking about. I forget if it was Wildlife or Back to the Egg that you were mentioning, Allan, but you do. I think you do kind of create it for yourself sometimes as to what the song does. I loved She's Giving Up Talking because I like the fact that he wrote about a friend's child that was having some issues, and just being very creative in the way that was put together, and the experimental music that he was using for that. Driving Around, I could take a pass on, but it's a theme that he uses on again and again and again. He likes rain. He likes to talk about situations of getting out of a bad situation into a what can be coming up next. I Do was one of his loveliest little ballads. It's not a great one, but I like it, and he sings it really nice with a little bit of a rough voice, and I kind of like the effect of that. Some of the other songs were all okay. Tiny Bubble okay, Magic okay. Your Way was a nice little country piece, and it was a nice little message. Maybe they weren't fantastic, great songs like White Album type songs or whatever, but I thought they were solid productions. Spinning on the Axis was very interesting in its arrangement. About You, I could have passed on. It was not the strongest of his songs on the album. The instrumental Heather was actually very, very good. And if you take out Heather Mills out of the whole situation, I can still enjoy it, even though if he sings Heather at the end of it. And Back in the Sunshine was, I think that's the track that he wrote with the son, James, right? James plays on it.
Right. He does
Um,
play on it. Yep.
that's a passable track. It's all right. It's not bad. I like the fact that James is on the record. So again, because I'm emotionally involved in the performer, that I like it for that purpose. I think Your Loving Flame is one of his best ballads ever. That's a gorgeous record. And it's nice he has all these different types of music, like he does on so many of his records, like New, as we just discussed. There's a lot of different flavors here. And speaking of flavor, riding into Jaipar is a very interesting track to listen to, and very experimental. In fact, I thought sitar is on the record until I read up on it a little bit further to see who was playing what. And there isn't a sitar, but apparently there was keyboard and other, I think it's called a tempora. Indian instrument.
Yeah, that is an Indian instrument.
Yeah, so I thought that was a very interesting track and a lot of fun to listen to, and maybe it deserves a little bit more appreciation by Rolling Stone or whoever else is reviewing the albums. Rinse the Raindrops is a terrific song. It's a little long, but I really like the rocker. I like McCartney stretching himself and playing a bit more rock and roll. I mean, that's what's nice about this record. If you listen to Run Devil Run and then you listen to this one, he's really in a rocking mood, and he's and I really enjoyed those tracks. Freedom is a whole other story, and we could do a whole podcast on the song Freedom if you really want to, but I'm just going to throw the one thing out to you. I believe that the song Freedom is essentially Give Peace a Chance with different lyrics. It's essentially the same type of message, but it's got mislaid, if you will, as more of a pro-war song. it really wasn't. That was not the intent of the record. But I really liked Freedom, and I just think it deserves a little better reception than it did.
I like the song Freedom a lot, but I do feel like, and I can't fault Paul for being so gifted that he can just write a song. It sounded like something that he could have written in 5 minutes. And I just wish that he put a little bit more effort with another verse or two.
Right.
But his vocals are fantastic. The message is very simple. It worked for that concert.
Yeah.
The concert for 9/11.
Yeah.
And but I don't know if I go so far as to say what you said about Give Peace a Chance, though.
Yeah, to
I
me,
mean, look,
if
it's
I had a
different.
hammer with
We all have.
What's that, Alan?
To me, it's If I Had a Hammer with different lyrics. It sounds
If I Had a Hammer.
melodically a bit like If I Had a Hammer.
Well, let's take Your Piece of Chance for a second. There's a lot of nonsensical lyrics around the chant of All I'm Saying Is Give Peace a Chance, right? I mean,
Wait
there's
a
a lot
minute.
of. Yeah.
I'm defending John now. No, no, Give Peace a Chance to me, even though I'm a big John fan. To me, it's a great slogan, but not much of a song. I don't think of it as a song, really. It's just him repeating that over again and spontaneously improvising lyrics, who's in the room and stuff like that.
Right.
So I
Right.
don't think of it much as his composition, really. Well, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But
But anyway.
But Ed, I do want to say something though.
Thanks,
Listening
Joe.
to, because I've always put Driving Rain as my least favorite Paul album. It still may be, but recently we did a show on Talk More Talk where we revisited it, and I don't have nearly as much dislike for it as I did the first few times I heard it. And hearing you go through all the songs, I'm thinking, yeah, now I do like that one, and I did like
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
time. I have much more of a, I don't know, appreciation for it than I did at the beginning. And hearing you go through the songs and why you like them really made me think about that.
Cool.
Very nice. Well, it's like I said many times, Joe, your opinions over time can change,
They can.
and a lot depends on whether or not you're going to devote the time to actually listen to this music later on and hear what other people have to say. That's one of the great things about podcasts, like what we do
Yeah.
on Talk More Talk and things we said today.
And that's
All right.
kind of a nice segue into my number 2, because this next album is Pressed to Play, and when I first heard the album, I wasn't that impressed with it. I thought, it's all right, it's got a good. I liked Press. I loved the video. I thought it was brilliant video, but I thought most of the songs were, okay. They really didn't grab me. It really wasn't until I saw the Talk More Talk videos, and I was also listening to Take It Away, which was a great podcast with Chris Mercer and Ryan Brady, who unfortunately has passed away.
Yeah.
And they talk about this album at great length, as well as you guys did with Talk More Talk. And I was like, well, with this album, maybe it needs to be listened to again, and try to appreciate what his experimentations were on this record. And I went back to it, and of course, I'd always liked some of it. And Stranglehold is a good, solid track. I could have done without Good Times Feels the Sun. That's to me, that automatically
Sounds like a Viagra commercial.
That automatically told me, didn't get me excited about the record, But then Talk More Talk, I thought was, whoa, this is the second track right here. Just go right into this, because it's just very interesting. It's fun experimentation. I liked all that. The Footprints is a beautiful ballad, another one of his outstanding ballads. And Only Love Remains. Now, I could do a whole thing on Only Love Remains, and I'll keep it brief. Definitely one of his top tier writing songs he's ever written. Okay, solo, Beatles, whatever you want to call it. I love this beautiful ballad. I've dedicated it to couples that I've known and weddings that I've been to, I always request it and they never play it. It kills me, you know. If you get the 7-inch single box set, it includes the sax version,
Right.
with the sax piece that was done in the music video. So I was in love. I'm right off the bat, I'm in love with the 7-inch singles because of that. But it's a great, great, beautiful love song, and it should have risen this album into the top 10 or whatever on Billboard. I don't think it did very well on Billboard.
Went to number 30, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. And New, by the way, went top 10.
Yeah. So side 2, Press, again, is a great record. Although, again, we're talking about lyrics here. You know, I mean, I don't know where he is in the bathroom or whatever. Or he's using improvised lyrics to get through a piece of a song that he can't come up with a better line for. And he ends up just leaving it in there. Like, Oklahoma was never like this. What? I'll never understand that. But, you know, at this point, I love it, though. Every time I hear it, it makes me laugh. So
Mhm.
what the
Ursa
hell, you
Major, Ursa Minor.
know?
Hmm.
Oh,
You know, Pretty Little Head. That's where there you are with that one there. And I think it's a very good production. I just again being more experimental, and I enjoy that a lot more now than I did some time ago. Move over Busker. I like he does these kinds of things every so often, and it makes me think of that scene in Broad Street where he plays the busker. You know, and.
Yesterday. Oh my
Angry. I could never understand what the hell he was angry about. And that kind of frustrated me with that record. And so I kind of not too keen on that one there. However, Absurd, however, is a brilliant record, a brilliant song. And I think the additional tracks that come along with it would have made it a better record overall had he had the foresight of putting those on the album, you know.
Hmm. What makes, however, Absurd brilliant to you?
I like the wordplay on it. I like the lyrics. I don't have them in front of me, but I like where he's coming from with it, coming up with these different ironic ideas as he goes through it, and it just makes, you know, I don't know. I can't give you a specific answer as to what I like about it, but I like the fact that he's thinking the way he is. It's just off the cuff thinking.
It's stream of consciousness lyrics.
Yes.
It's kind of like I Am the Walrus in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just whatever words and images come to mind, put it down and go with it.
Yeah.
You know. So
Cool.
yeah. All right.
Okay, and you want my third one here? My third one. Okay. So my third one is going to be the very famous Back to the Egg. Which you know, I have to remember these albums as I first heard them. Okay, so when I was 17 or 18, this album came out, and by that point, I was certainly a fan of Paul McCartney and the Beatles and all that, but I had not collected all the albums at that point. So I think by that point, I had Band on the Run and I had Wings Over America, and I was aware of the other singles, right? I knew about With a Little Luck and all that jazz. But I turned this one on and I heard the reception and Getting Closer. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I like just the sound of it right off the bat, you know. I've heard, again, some reviewers, critics that jump on him with lyrics, writing about a salamander, but I think it's very much about writing about a relationship that isn't really going so well as much as he'd like it to. You know, that's my take on it. Okay, that's where I'm like, you know, he even talks about beware of women or beware of weather, and then he sings about beware of women, and maybe the woman is a bit of a snake. You know, he's not necessarily always running about Linda. Okay. So I liked Getting Closer, and I really couldn't understand why some of these critics could have a little bit of imagination, or at least my imagination, which is sometimes very scary.
Hmm.
We're Open Tonight is a fantastic track. My only problem with We're Open Tonight and with So Glad to See You Here is that he had just written these type of songs for the Venus and Mars record.
Hmm.
And
Similar.
I thought to myself, I said, these songs, there was only a couple of albums in between. There had to be other subjects you could have written about. And there's obviously a lot of material that he chose not to use at that particular time. That I would have liked to have seen him try something else rather than just writing about going to an opening for a concert or playing somewhere or being thankful or grateful to an audience, or even if it's not grateful to an audience, it's maybe just grateful to one person, whoever So Glad to See You is supposed to be all about. But production-wise, I like a lot of the ideas that he puts forth. Again, we talked about the idea as to whether he was using punk or new wave influences, and it's clearly there. Spin It On, not my favorite track, but it's okay. I liked All Siam, Sir, and I had my own version of what that story is about. Arrow Through Me is a tremendous song, and again should have risen this album into being up on the top of the charts, but it did not do that. I think Orchestra is poorly placed. It should have been after So Glad to See You Here, I think. Maybe I'm influenced on that because of the concert for Kampuchea, which
Yeah,
is the way they performed in that way. But anyway, that's just my little thought there. I happen to love the ballads After the Ball and Million Miles, and more impressively was Winter Rose and Love Awake. And it's just a shame that Love Awake in particular gets buried on this record. It's another one of his most beautiful songs he's ever written, and nobody knows it. But I think it's a lovely record, good rocking record, feels good. Would have been nice if you put Good Nights and Not on there. Maybe you might have been a bigger hit. But it's underrated by a lot of people in the press, and I think by a lot of fans. I think it's great that nowadays you're seeing a lot of McCartney albums getting a lot of a different review. Even Ram back in the day people thought it was horrible. It went to number one, I believe, but number two, okay. But people said people didn't like it. They didn't think it was. I didn't think it was that great until I began to listen to it again. I said my friend pointed it out to me, and we listened to it, and I said, "Oh my God, Backseat of My Car, that's on this album," and I began to reevaluate the whole record. So it's just a matter of time and where you are in your life, and listening to something again years later and maybe identifying with it differently.
That's the beautiful thing about all art. You have no idea how you're going to respond to it years later.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have I said in my podcast shows that a lot of George Harrison's music, spiritual stuff, was way over people's heads. And then years later, they can relate to it more. So maybe his music was, way ahead of its time in that regard, a lot of his spiritual messages. But there are certain things that as you get older, you can understand more and relate to more.
True.
But yeah, you can say that about so many artists and so many albums and songs. So it's kind of interesting. I picked the three of you to do this show, and we have very like minds here.
But we want Ken. We want Ken. Come on, we want your list.
I know that you made Ken's day with two of those at least.
Well, I got to tell you, and I'm not going to go through every song like you guys did, but my number 3 choice was Back to the Egg. For a lot of the reasons like Joe was saying, there are times, not only prior to Back to the Egg, but throughout Paul's entire solo career, when you wish he would rock more. and you know that he can. He's one of the best rockers. And sometimes you'll have an album, like my favorite album is Flowers in the Dirt, but Figure of Eight is the rocker on there, and the other version that came out, the Bob Clearmountain one, is better than I think the one that was on Flowers in the Dirt. It's kind of tepid, that version. There are albums that Paul puts out where you need more rockers in there, and Back to the Egg has more of that. It has more of an edge, and I do love Spin It On very much. It's kind of a punk and rockabilly feel combined. I love his voice when he's really screaming. It's got that rough edge on Old Siam Sir. Definitely, I love that. He did a lot of things with his voice there where I wasn't used to hearing it before. What is it? Not Winter, Million Miles. Where his voice is very strained.
It's probably Winter Rose.
Yeah,
Is that
Winter
one?
Rose. And it's like, I was thinking, is he losing his voice here? But he's intentionally making his voice that way.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting now, the way that he plays around with his voice. We've been critical, certainly on Talk More Talk, with something like Rockestra or So Glad to See You Here, where you have this tremendous, the greatest musicians practically on this earth, and this is what you do with them. The potential of what you can deliver with those great musicians. And Rockestra is a very simple song.
Yeah.
But it's still a great instrumental, and I love it just the way it is. I love the sound of it. I love the whole idea of a rock orchestra, and it's got a full sound like a rock orchestra. It's executed very well, and I love So Glad to See You Here. I have no problem with loving the songs. I just wish that you got all these tremendous talents, do more with them. That's, Arrow Through Me, I think, is absolutely brilliant. I think it's been recognized more in recent years. It's an extremely difficult song to sing because vocally he's all over the place. It's got a tremendous range that you have to sing that song in, kind of like a Burt Bacharach song in a way. And I love Baby's Request. I wish he did more of that stuff. He's so skillful at it. Like You Gave Me the Answer and Honey Pie and When I'm 64. In that vein, I love Getting Closer. I love starting off an album with a rocker like that. And To You is so strange. And that's definitely punk right there. It's a lot of good stuff all over Back to the Egg, and it sounds so fresh to this day. And Lawrence Juber, when we interviewed him at the Fest for Beatle Fans, was saying that a lot of people come up to him and Back to the Egg is like in their top 3 of Wings albums.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty impressive right there, especially if you've got Band on the Run and Venus and Mars and, to go with. It's all a question of taste. My number 2 choice is also Driving Rain. Driving Rain is an album that I liked when it first came out. And as the years have gone on, I appreciate it more and more and more. And I love the variety on that album. That's what Paul's been all about on most of his albums, really. And I love when he stretches and tries to have modern sounds and tries to sound a little bit contemporary. I like when he does a mixture of what you call traditional Paul with something that's experimental. Traditional on this album would be Your Love and Flame or I Do. And yet at the same time, you've got She's Given Up Talking with all this electronic drums and heavy drum sounds and everything, and playing with his voice and going through a filter and doing stuff like that. I love Spinning on an Axis to death, because he's playing around with his voice, he's improvising, just whatever's coming into his head then. It sounds very spontaneous. I love when he does stuff like that. Heather is a tremendous instrumental, like you said, Ed. And I like to comment whenever I bring up the song Heather, that if you listen to a lot of big band music, there are times when you don't hear vocals at all until towards the end of the song. They play the melody over and over, and then all of a sudden there's a verse at the end. And that's that's what Heather reminds me of. I love riding into Jaipur. I love the sound of that, the Indian instrumentation there. Very beautiful song. I'm actually not that crazy about Your Love and Flame. Sorry, Ed. I think that's one of his weakest ballads, and it's very monotonous sounding. Lonely Road, tremendous opening track, and I wish he'd bring that back live, because that's a great live song to do. You know, I hear your music and it's driving me wild, and the build up where he sings louder at the end and higher up. He does that quite a lot. He knows how to build up a song, and then towards the end he'll sing it in a higher register. He does that on I Do as well. Yeah, there's a lot of fantastic tunes.
Let me ask you a question about that, Ken. Regards to Lonely Road. I'm not sure if it was my CD, and I haven't listened to it. I mean, I listened to it today, but I guess I wasn't paying as close attention to it. But was there a bit in the opening percussion that's kind of a little bit off the track, if you will, of the song, that's a little bit distracting? Do you find anything
I don't hear
odd with the
anything like that.
percussion at all? No?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I'll listen now with that in mind, but I've never had a problem with any part of that song.
Okay.
You know,
I want to chime in with your loving flame. You know, the problem I have with it is the lyrics are too pedestrian for me, or for Paul. Never mind me, for Paul in that song. I like the music, the tune. I just think it's pretty by the numbers. The words he's coming up with, very much, June, spoon, moon, whatever they say with that one.
love, above, of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And my number one choice, which anyone who's ever followed my work will know, is Press to Play. I think Press to Play is a brilliant piece of work. I really do. I love the collaboration with Paul and Hugh Padgham. I know what a mess that album has become because of what the key participants have said about it. Hugh Padgham didn't so much mind the production on it. I mean, that was his style of production. He didn't like the material. He didn't think they were good songs. Eric Stewart, on the other hand, liked the songs, but didn't like the production. And Paul really doesn't talk about the album all that much. He did kind of diss the album, though, because when he toured in '89, he said he didn't want to go and tour with a bad album, which made you wonder, does he now think, or did he then think that Press to Play was a bad album? But I like the production on there, and as much as I keep hearing about how dated it is and the '80s sound, I like that sound, and I think it worked really well for him. I think Pretty Little Head, all the experimentation on a song like that, which has a very Peter Gabriel feel to it. I've been saying that for years. And Talk More Talk, I love that stuff. I love when Paul takes chances and does stuff like that. And I love the sound of it. I like heavy drums. I like synthesizers. It's not like everything I want Paul to do is that, but why not? Why not, work with producers of the moment that happen to be hot? And if he likes the sound, I think it really works for him. Part of the reason why I love Paul's catalog is because he chooses all the different producers that he does, even though the songs matter more than the production.
Yeah.
The albums don't sound the same from album to album.
Right.
Although in the '70s, Paul had his own style of production, so there was a similarity, but he still tried to change things up a bit, to go from London Town, more acoustic, to Back to the Egg, for example. But there's a huge difference between going from, Hugh Padgham to the several producers that worked on Flowers in the Dirt.
Yeah.
All the different ones, Jeff Lynne with Flaming Pie, David Kahn, all the different producers on New, the producers on Egypt Station. They all add something to the mix so that it keeps his catalog very interesting to me. I wouldn't want New to be followed with New 2, with the same producers, because it would just be like repeating what you just did. And what you said, Ed, about Footprints, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous tune. And Only Love Remains, I think is probably the best love song he's done in his solo career. But I prefer the one on the album to the single. I love the orchestration. Paul's vocals are absolutely fantastic there in the middle, in the bridge, you know. Old enough and strong enough to stretch across the world. You know, really, he's an octave higher than me, but his voice is so fantastic on that. I love the sound of Press, you know. Angry, when it comes to that song, I think of the same thing as I do with Rockestra. You got Phil Collins on there, you got Pete Townsend, and that's what you come up with. I love the song, I love the edge of it, I like Paul screaming on it, you know, but you got Pete Townsend and Phil Collins. Do more, you know. And I like However Absurd, which is one of the most Beatle-y songs of many of the solo Beatles. And I do agree with what you said about the bonus tracks. I think Tough on a Tightrope is an absolutely amazing song. And I loved his songwriting with Eric Stewart. I wish it had gone further. So, you know, Right Away is a clever song too, has kind of a jazzy feel to it. But, you know, I love the sound of that record. I love the variety on that record. Good Times Coming, Feel the Sun, I think is brilliant. Again, it's got some of the reggae stuff that he loves in there with Good Times Coming, going into the more poppy song with Feel the Sun. There's so much there to appreciate on that album. And, you know, I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of fans out there that love the old sound of Paul, like the Beatles sound, the 70s sound, the Wings sound, and didn't really go for when changes were made in the 80s. And I'm not saying they're all that way. No, there's a lot of fans that talk that way.
I know, but I'm trying, this is your moment, but you want people feedback too. So it's tough on a tightrope because you know, I love 80s production. I just think the songs, most of them are unremarkable on the album. I'm with you, Padgett, on it. You know, I don't think that's my problem with Press to Play, is why I don't like it so much. I just don't think the material, aside from, you know, Only Love Remains and, well, Footprints, I'm not as wild about Footprints as everybody else, but it is not a beautiful song. But and Press it's a fun single. But you know, to me, that's what I have a problem with it. You know, the 80s production has nothing to do with it for me.
That's
In
for
fact, I
you.
like that. You know, I like that.
Okay, I'm just telling you the feedback I get from a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of fans out there that stick to, you know, the more traditional McCartney sound, that want more of that don't want a more modern sound, that don't want him to gravitate towards the flavor of the month producer, you know. And you know, there are some people who have voiced that opinion, and it's a valid opinion. I happen to like when he stretches and works with different people. You know, I know what it's like, say, when McCartney 3 came out, and a lot of people were loving that album, and all of a sudden, the last track, When Winter Comes, people were saying, "Oh, it's the old Paul." You know, that's the Paul I want.
I like the rest of it better than that one.
But you know, there are people that think that way, that love that old style, and you know, that's what the world's about, different opinions.
But do they always tell you when you ask them? Do they always say, "Ken, what I don't like about it is the production," or do they say they don't like some of the songs on it? Or
Most
is it
people, when
mostly
it comes to Press to Play, they don't like the production. They don't like 80s sounds. They don't like synthesizers. They don't like heavy drums. And it's not just that, you know, when I talk to those same people, I ask them, you know, do you like that kind of production, period? And they don't.
I'll be in a minute.
Like, I love McCartney too, you know, and it's as experimental and like sounding weird and different and contemporary, should I say, for that,
Uh-huh.
as you can get, you know.
The thing
All right.
with the 80s sound, I mean, if you listen to Flowers in the Dirt, there's a lot of 80s sounding on that record too. I mean, you know, it's a lot of synthesizers, the Swan and so forth.
This one's great.
So, but yet Flowers in the Dirt is lauded as one of his more triumph albums, except if some certain fans don't like it or they don't like it now or whatever. But it doesn't quite get the poor remarks about it being 80s sounding like Press to Play does.
Right. Well, for a lot of people, Flowers in the Dirt was Paul's big comeback.
Yeah.
His
That was
escape
fantastic.
What's that?
It's fantastic.
80s sound.
I'm sorry, Ken. I'm sorry, Alan.
What'd you say? I couldn't hear you.
I said it was his escape from the 80s sound when you said it was his comeback.
I call it his step step in the right direction album.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like the 80s sound in the 80s, and so that feeling has sort of continued along. Whereas, if you listen to the 60s sound, it's timeless. You listen to the 70s sound, it's timeless. The 80s sound was this sort of pit in the 80s that everyone fell into for a while. And then Flowers in the Dirt, he got good again. I don't hate
it's
that much.
I know a friend of mine I played him Flowers in the Dirt when it came out. He'd given up on Paul, one of those people. And he said, he's back. I'll never forget when he said that. I put it there for him. I said, listen to this. And he goes, he's back. He put it there a lot,
Well, it's all a matter of taste. The 80s are not just, I don't think of 80s music as just belonging from that decade, because I still listen to 80s music all the time. So, and every now and then I'll hear a band that's out today that has an 80s sound to it. So I don't think that it's necessarily dated. I think it really comes down to your own taste.
Yeah.
I've never understood the dated argument anyway, because I always say, if a person today in 2022 just says, well, I don't like these songs because they sound dated. I'm like, well, do you love 2022? I mean, you want it to sound like 2022? Is that what you want? You want, all those songs, whatever it might be, the 50s. If you don't like the 50s, you think it's dated for the 50s. Well, you want it to sound like 2022. That stuff,
Hey,
I don't know what.
I like sounds from all the decades. I don't just say this is 50s music, this is 60s music. How many times have I said there are songs that the Beatles did, the early Beatles stuff, which some people would say sounds dated. It has no effect on me. I still love it the same.
Yeah, I don't know why it does. I don't know why. I'm with you on that. I don't understand.
If all that we listened to were songs that sound contemporary, we'd be eliminating about 95% of all the recorded music that's been out there. So that's pretty ridiculous.
I don't know that I want it to sound contemporary either, if it were within pop music. I mean, classical music, fine, but it's, for me, it's just the 80s. I'll put on a movie from the 80s and that saxophone and the electric piano will come in and I'll say, oh, that I forgot this movie came out in the 80s. Turn it off.
I don't know why that turns you off. I mean,
I don't know, but what Alan says, I've encountered that with people as well. And my nephew, well, he's only 31 now, but I mean, he wasn't born in the 80s, but he can't watch 80s movies for whatever reason or listen to 80s music. It seems to bother him. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's not wild about it.
I have no problem with it. But then that's me. Anyway, so this has been great conversation right here. It's just interesting how we all picked Back to the Egg.
Yeah,
Isn't
I told
that
you
something?
at the beginning. Lately, I think that it's rising up, that reputation for that. A lot of people. I hear people too. Like I think Alan said, mostly you hear bad things about it. But I've encountered people lately in my travels around the social media who saying, "Oh, I'm liking that now." So.
All right. So I want to remind everybody that Allan's new book with Adrian Sinclair, the McCartney Legacy Volume 1, comes out December the 13th. We're actually going to be recording a show on Things We Said Today with Allan and Adrian this coming week, and should be out on Thursday. Okay. I believe it'll be the first interview going out there. I hope with Allan.
Good luck, Allan.
And yeah, and not only that, but if you want to see Allan and Adrian at the Grammy Museum's new Beatles exhibit in Newark, New Jersey, they will be there on the 14th of December. And Darren DeVivo and myself will be there heckling the two of them. If you want to see that in action. Just kidding. What's that?
You're gonna throw stuff.
Yeah, throw tomatoes at you. All right, so I'm going to include in our description box links to how you can get in contact or listen to everyone's programs. And thanks to all of you. Thank you, Allan, Joe, and Ed. And thanks to all of you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And we'll see you next time.